How quickly could it be done to bring Huawei's 5G involvement down to zero, do you think, as is being suggested?
What's been suggested is that it would be scaled back to zero by 2023, and we're already hearing noises from industry that is a very aggressive time frame indeed. Currently, the percentage of equipment infrastructure provided by Huawei is at about the 35% that the government had originally set in its decision about Huawei. So that is going to be a very ambitious target. On the other hand, I suppose it shows to the US in particular, and the large number of Tory MPs who still have concerns about Huawei, that the government is serious and is really taking a change of track here in relation to Huawei.
Do you think that change is entirely politically motivated, or is there some technological change or some change with Huawei that has prompted this?
What's being said is that because a few days ago, on the 15th of May, the US Department of Commerce restricted supplies of US microchip technology to Huawei and some of its affiliate companies. That is the sort of technical hook on which this review is being hung. Although I think that that's been coming for a while. You may remember last May, the US did an executive order which sort of overnight blocked Huawei, US companies from supplying Huawei, and that immediately interrupted chip supply. That was lifted for a while. So the idea is that, well, if the microchip technologies are very difficult to produce, and Huawei is reliant on them, and so if it can't use them, what's it going to use instead? I think it's been working on its own solution, and that's what's causing concern. It's reported to the intelligence community.
And when we talk about, or the government talks about reducing Huawei's involvement in the 5G network, which bits of Huawei are we talking about? Are we talking about software or are we talking about hardware? How possible and how costly would it be to reduce all of Huawei's involvement to zero by 2023?
Huawei is a major supplier of hardware initially. It's been supplying hardware infrastructure to the telecommunications sector since about 2003 in this country. So there's a lot of its kit out there. It's primarily hardware, but 5G, the next technology, will have a large software component, and even existing hardware still has a lot of software making it work, and so on. BT are reported as saying it would cost them as much as 500 million to strip out the Huawei from its infrastructure.
Can I ask you about, just very finally, and this is a complete techie question, which I'm going to ask very badly because I don't understand the technology behind all this, but that 5G will prompt a kind of software revolution, that as much as the hardware was needed for 3G and 4G, yes, it's needed 5G, but it's kind of already there. And what's going to come is a software change that Huawei isn't particularly good at, and that much more sort of the American companies, Western companies, they are much better at doing the software stuff. So Huawei will kind of see its role reduced anyway because the market will facilitate that. Is that true? And is that part of the reason why they think they can get it down to zero much more quickly than they'd envisaged?
It's more or less true. The hardware for 5G is going to sit on top of existing 4G, but there's going to be an awful lot more of it because 5G is going to be operating at much faster speeds. It means that the range between different antennas, instead of having a sort of huge, humongous, massive 4G antenna somewhere, you're going to have what's predicted to be an antenna on every street lamp type of frequency. So there's going to be a lot more kit, but also the core of the network, as you describe, is going to be a lot more dynamic. It's going to be able to scale up and down, and using techniques that are familiar to us from cloud services. That sort of technology will be brought into the network, offering higher speeds and the ability to manage, spikes in demand and all sorts of different devices attaching to the network. So Huawei has been criticised for the quality of its software, even by the UK's cybersecurity centre last year. Huawei is not primarily a software company, and as we see the core of the 5G network going more to cloud services, that does introduce the possibility of other providers coming into this very, very consolidated market. There aren't many competitors. That's part of the reason why we're in the situation we're in. Huawei is still a low-cost provider, and excluding Huawei from your network means that you're driven to a small number of providers, Ericsson and Nokia, for example, who are higher cost.